The Hobby Lobby Game Changer. First, get a 10mm fish spine and properly set it in your vise. Load a bobbin with heavy thread, here 6/0 nano silk. Start right in the middle and clench down the little gap. And then cut the tag end off. And then create a nice thread base. Now go to some fox fur. You can find this at Hobby Lobby in various colors. Here it's kind of like a raccoon fox thing. Get a little piece out. It should be maybe like a quarter of the width of a pencil. Strip all the under fur and all that. Measure a tail about 2 times the length of the fish spine and tie it directly on top. The fur may want to go to one of the sides of the thing, and that's okay. Now go back to the hide. Get a clump about 2 times the size of the previous and strip out the fur. You'll need 2 of these for this one shank. You want the tips to extend about halfway into the tail. You will reverse tie it. Position the tips past the eye of the shank and tie it down and clip off, leaving a little butt. This will help splay it out. And do the same to the underside. This will create a nice color. Align the tips of those on top. Sometimes this helps to position it on one side of the hook and then wrap it onto the direct bottom. And do the same with cutting the butts off, leaving a slight angle. Now finagle it and push those tips back and bring your thread forward and create a thread dam, making sort of a bullet head to push the fibers back. Then go ahead and whip finish your thread. And cut your thread off. Now go to a 15mm fish skull shank. You'll need 2 of those in this fly. But first grab one. With the other still in the vise, go ahead and slip the other shank through the eye. And then take it out and position the new shank in the vise. Go back to some fur and cut a nice clump off, about 2 times the previous. This will create a nice taper and ship out all the fuzzies again. Now, bring your thread in, and again clamp down the little gap, securing the back shank, and cut the tag end off. Now go to your fur. You want the tips to extend about halfway into the previously tied ones, again making the taper, and again reverse tie them, first on directly on top of the hook. Both of these will be tied just a little ways behind the 15mm eye, but before the gap. And do the same thing with aligning the tips, but this time on the bottom, or on top if your vise is inverted. Again, push the fibers back, one at a time or both together, if you can, and make a thread dam, or a slight bullet head. This is really slippery stuff, so make sure your thread grips good and tight. Maybe use some wax if you want to. Once secure, go ahead and whip finish your thread. And cut it off. Now grab another 15mm shank, and do the same as before, and position it again in your vise. And like before, go ahead and wrap the gap close. Get it clumped, but this time about the same as the previous, on the first 15mm shank. Millimeter. And then whip finish your thread. Now, go to a firehole hook. Hobby Lobby doesn't have hooks. Take the tail off and set it someplace safe. Now put the hook in your vise. Start your thread behind the eye and take open spiral wraps down to just above the point, and then cut the tag end off. Go slightly down into the bend, and then wrap back, creating a nice, rigid thread base. Go to some Echinoflex or other beading wire, here 15 pounds, and cut about a 3-inch section off, with bad scissors. With one end, tie it on top of the hook, but kind of off to the far side. So it's on top of the hook, but you'll be able to lie another piece flat right beside it on top of the hook. Now, from underneath, through the eye, and out, go ahead and connect the tail. Pretty close, but still allowing a little wiggle room with the wire and the eye of the shank. Tie the wire directly next to the other piece of wire. They should both be on top of the hook shank, slightly off-centered, one on the far side, one on the near side. When you get close to the eye, go ahead and cut the excess beading wire off. Make sure to cinch down your thread types really hard to secure that wire. Now, go again to some fox hair. Again, get an even bigger clump, continuing the taper. And again, making sure the tips align about halfway into the previous clump. The first on the hook should be about just in front of the point. Pull the fibers again and bullet head the stack and clump of fox fur. But instead of cutting your thread off, just go ahead and jump in front of it. Now bring it about halfway between the point and the eye of the hook. And continue the taper with another evenly sized clump from the previous one tied on the hook. And again, pull the fibers back and bullet head it. This will be the last clump of fox fur tied in. Make sure it's the biggest, about 1.5 times the width of a pencil. Sometimes you need to cut 2 clumps to make the biggest clump, unless you have a longer pair of scissor blades. If you're using 2 clumps, go ahead and connect the 2 clumps and bring it back. This time, the tail should extend a good way past the hook bend, creating a nice collar and head to the fly. And again, reverse tie them. Go to a slightly smaller clump, about half the size you tied on top of the hook, and tie it on the bottom. This will help create keel and let the fly ride right. For the final time, push all the fibers back. And bullet head the fly. Cinch it down to flare up all the material, creating a nice head that will push a lot of water. Now, grab an 8mm large white sequins and a 5mm smaller blacker sequins, here iridescent and brown. Put some super glue in an old hook tray. Now with the bigger one face side, go ahead and place some super glue on the middle of the sequins. Then grab the smaller darker one and place it directly on top. This is a cheap way to make eyes. You'll need 2 of these. First, take one eye and put some super glue on the back side. Then stick it slightly behind the nose of the fly, on the far side, and set the glue. Then do the same to the near side. Let the glue set, and that's it, that's the fly.